show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi, good evening, listeners. I'm here with you, Louise Marie, here with the wonderful Claire Harley, and we're going to be talking all things this evening to do with PhDs, how Claire manages her academic CPD, studying her doctorate, as well as managing a full-time role in SLT. She'll be talking through her journey, what it is she's currently studying, and talk us through kind of the logistics, how to get into that process, all the things that she loves about it, and how she manages that quite complicated juggling balancing act, I imagine, Claire.
Hi, Louise.
So welcome. If you want to tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, hello, I'm Claire Harley. I'm an assistant principal at a school in Leicester, and in my spare time, I guess, I am a doctoral student at the University of Nottingham. So I'm doing what's called an EdD, which is a PhD, but for people who are working in education, and it's called a professional doctorate. So it's very heavily linked to the kind of work that you do in school.
If you want to, sorry, carry on for me.
I was going to say, other than that, I'm a mum of two as well. So I'm currently on maternity leave. So I feel like a little bit of a fake saying that I'm full-time at work at the minute because I'm currently on mat leave.
Okay, nice. So if you tell us a little bit, Claire, you said you're currently in SLT at the moment. Whereabouts did you say you're based?
So I'm in Leicester. I live south of the city and my school is in North Leicester. So it's an 11 to 16 secondary school, and I've been assistant principal there for 5 years now. So but it's quite an interesting place to work because our trust likes to move people around their different roles, and so I was originally AP for curriculum, did a few bits in qualitative education, moved to assessment, and when I go back from my maternity leave, I'll be leading on personal development and our wider curriculum, including vocational, which is really new to me personally, but really exciting.
Nice. So it seems like you've got quite a varied experience in the realm of kind of SLT, and you've tried your hand in different things.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's helpful. So it's more of a development thing that our trust does. So you're not just kind of put down one kind of like thing that you do, and you gain a little bit of expertise in all the different kind of areas, so that if you choose to go and be a head teacher one day, you kind of know all the acronyms kind of ready to go.
Yeah, there are a lot of those in education, aren't there?
Yeah, I've started going on my keep in touch days, and I've been doing our like high profile behavior meetings, and for the first one I just sat there like not knowing what anybody was saying because they're just using all these different random things, but you kind of pick it up as you go along, I guess.
Okay, well, thanks. We're so pleased to have you here and to learn. And selfishly, as I said, I'm looking at not a doctorate because I'm not there yet. Looking at my master's in January, and actually, just to kind of give viewers a bit of background, how we kind of met. Well, we met on LinkedIn, didn't we? Funnily enough, a few months back, and Claire's been a real support to me, talking about how she's managing her role, which is kind of where this show has come from, really. And so hoping, today that we can give listeners some advice on how to balance it, because I imagine it can be quite daunting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think probably one of like the biggest problems with anything like doing a master's, which you're doing, which is really exciting, or going and doing a doctoral, whatever it might be, is that there's kind of like a mystery around it, or everyone assumes that like because it's really hard, it must be really scary, or like that only certain people can do it. And so I'm pretty vocal on social media about how like I'm maybe not like the most traditionally academic person. Like I wasn't a straight A student at school or anything like that. So I don't think that I think sometimes people think it's not for them, or that it's kind of full of all this kind of hidden language and stuff. So for those of us who are doing it, I think it's really important to share your experiences and kind of demystify the whole thing, because particularly with things like an EdD, it's made for us. It's meant for people who are working in schools and in education. So it shouldn't be this kind of like ivory tower away from us type thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, I actually don't know much about EdDs, and to be honest, until we'd started speaking like a couple of months ago, I didn't know they were a separate thing. I just thought there was kind of like masters and doctorates, and I didn't know there was an EdD. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's I think they've been going for quite a while, but if you I think it's kind of a mixture of a PhD and like an MBA type thing. So in the same way as when you start your course in January, you'll do modules. The first so I'm doing a part-time PhD. So the first 2 years were basically a master's kind of thing. So you do assignments like you do at master's level, and then because they know you're working part-time, you get a lot of support in the first couple of years. And then when you're kind of ready and able, then you get a lot of support setting up to write your thesis. And they're not as big as, so like a traditional PhD, you'd be writing upwards of 80,000 to like 100,000 words. Whereas anything that's kind of geared towards us as a profession is a little bit more accessible. So it sounds like a lot, but mine's 60,000 words. And you can do that as either 3 case studies of stuff that you're doing in school, or you can do what I'm doing, which is just pick a question that you're really interested in and then work on that basically. So it's not quite the whole like giant thesis that you might see in other subjects, but I think is really helpful and like much more practical.
Yeah, lovely. Well, thanks for educating me on the issue. Can I ask what can you share with us what your thesis will be on?
Yeah, so I'm looking at, so I get really excited about it. And so
that's great. We love that.
So I'm looking at the idea of research engagement. So I'm somebody who's like been quite research engaged through my whole career. Like the running joke amongst my friends is that I've never really left uni, and the things that I will do for a student discount are like getting quite pathetic now. But so I've basically just been studying like my whole life. And as a teacher, I feel like I've benefited so much from being research informed, reading books, reading blogs. And so when I kind of started studying, I thought, well, this must be a really good thing for everybody. So what I'll do is I'll research how we can make it possible for teachers to engage in educational research in schools. And so that's kind of where I started. But the more I got into it, the more I realized actually, it's not a positive experience for everybody. And there are some like quite interesting power dynamics about who says things and who doesn't say things and all that kind of stuff. So I've kind of gone into like the murky waters of what it kind of means. And so now my research is looking at how teachers view educational research, rather than starting off as, oh, it must be a good thing because I thought it was a good thing. Actually, I've stepped back and thought about, well, actually, we don't really have a definition for what we think educational research is from teachers' perspectives. And that's what my research hopes to do. So I've done 14 interviews with some wonderful participants who identify as people who have engaged with research in one way or another. And so I'll be able to say, based on the experiences of these people that I've looked at in a lot of depth, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is what we like, this is what we don't.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think you're so right. I'd never really thought about it before, because obviously as teachers, we are, and lots of schools quite rightly are then talking about engaging staff in CPD and about how our CPD should be hinging on credible evidence and being evidence informed. But teachers often don't get time to really engage with it. We kind of just said, oh yeah, here's a new system we're bringing in and it's based on this idea. And, you know, have you heard about cognitive load and, you know, all these other things. Display on the wall because there's too much cog load for students, and it feels like a lot of research is, you know, is kind of thrown at us, and we don't have time to really engage with it. And so it's wonderful to hear that actually there are doctorates that are designed for us to actually kind of really explore research properly, to kind of critically engage with it, not to just kind of take research at face value, to actually be like, okay, where has this research come from? You know, who's authored this research? What was the sample size? Is it representative? You know, what's the context behind this research? So I think for me, like I said, it is reassuring to know that if we do want to then take the next step as teachers and actually move into more research-based activities ourselves and really push our own CPD on, that actually there are supportive plans in place and qualifications in place, like these PhD eds, that we can then move into. So that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. No,
go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think that you've brought up a really interesting point about like we're fed this kind of thing, and I think that one way, there's lots of other ways that you could do it, but one way that you can kind of take ownership of the information that we're kind of fed all the time in education is by doing things like studying like we're doing, and then you do kind of have that space in which you can ask questions and ask for like where these kind of things come from. So my running joke at school is like, if anybody says in briefing or anything, the research says, like, I'm like, well, what research? Like who, when, what kind of data analysis? Like there should be like a buzzer we can press so we can like pause, who, like, and having that like empowerment of teachers, like we should know what we're being shared because we assume it's right, but how do we know it's right?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so thank you for sharing obviously kind of the things that you're looking at, and obviously you've touched upon your motivations for wanting to do that particular thesis. For people like me who don't really know much about your kind of PhD that you're studying for, how do we logistically go about starting the process? So imagine we have decided we're really interested in doing it, we're really keen to kind of get into maybe a particular thesis, and kind of we know this could be for us. That's quite an overwhelming thought. Like, where do we start? How do we know where to apply to? Things like, how do we secure funding for things? Because obviously it's expensive. If you've got time to kind of tell us just a bit about the overview of the process.
Yeah, so one thing to bear in mind is that if you're applying for an EdD in particularly in England, which is a context I know the most, there's no like one set way of doing anything. And so you might look at one university and it will be every Thursday all day and you have to like take time off work. With other universities, so I picked Nottingham. I'm not sure if they still do it actually, but at the time that I started, they did a summer school. So rather than going to lectures every single week when you're knackered during term time, I could just do them for 2 weeks in the summer holidays. This was before I had children, and so I could just go and spend 2 weeks of my summer holidays doing all my lectures all at once, and that really appealed to me. Whereas a couple of other unis that I looked at, I would have to drive there on a Thursday night, go back again on a Saturday morning, and so there's no kind of one set course program. So my advice would be to take some time looking at universities that are within like reasonable traveling distance and see what kind of structure they've got to see what suits you. The other thing as well is that they have different varying like fees as well. So you can get a student loan for a master's or doctoral study. So if you don't have that level of qualification already, you can get a student loan out kind of like you did with your undergraduate, and it's another loan that comes up on your paycheck basically. So I've been studying for just over 3 years and I've just started paying mine back while I'm still doing it, and I was a bit terrified that first paycheck that I knew it was going to be coming in, because I didn't know how much it was going to feel like, or like how much it was going to be, but actually it worked out really nicely because it was the same time as teachers' pay rises. And so I basically just didn't get the pay rise, and it worked out fine. So it felt like for 3 years I just panicked about it because I didn't know what I kind of got myself in for. But actually, in the end, it was fine. But some unis do kind of like price themselves out a little bit, in my opinion. So I got, I won't say what uni it was, but I got accepted to a very prestigious university, and the fees cost more than you could borrow for a loan. So I just couldn't go, basically. I just couldn't financially make it happen. So it's quite an interesting one. So yeah, some of them are not too bad, but some of them are crazy expensive. So you definitely have to like shop around.
Yeah. Where would you advise, how would you advise people to kind of do that shopping around? Where would we go? Is there kind of like comparisons?
Not really. So the only thing I'd say is it's really handy to be able to travel to the university that you're studying with. So I live in Leicester and I'm at Nottingham, and our train station, it takes me half an hour to get there. And so it's a manageable commute for the days that I need to go in. Now I'm in my research stage. I don't go in very often, but when I was doing my talk courses, I was going all the time. So if I'd gone a bit further afield, it would have been like an added stress. So I'd look geographically at where is reasonable for you to have a look at going, and then kind of go from there. But I'm just really sad, so I just made myself an Excel spreadsheet and scored them, and and then kind of decided where I was going to go. The other thing to look at as well is it's really time consuming, but it is definitely worthwhile, is contacting potential supervisors at universities as well, because you apply to the university, but you end up working very closely one-to-one with an academic that you don't really get until you go to like masters or PhD level. So getting on with somebody and having someone that's got a similar research interest to you is really, really important.
Thank you. So when you're talking about kind of meeting supervisors, you said you applied to the university, and you said obviously important to kind of go to one nearby, because obviously there will be some traveling elements. What happens? How do you find a supervisor? Do you kind of apply, then get accepted, and then find somebody afterwards? Or is that part of the application process?
It's not an official part of the application process, but you can just email them. So I applied to 3 different universities when I was looking at starting, and ended up at Nottingham. And I spoke to potential supervisors at all 3, and they don't mind, because obviously they really want people to come in and join on their courses, and they want to see if they're compatible with you, if they're potentially going to be supervising you. So you just email them, and it feels really cringy, to be honest with you. Like, it is quite awkward. It's like, oh, hi, I'm Claire, and I kind of want to study with you. But they don't mind, and they do get it all the time. So it feels a bit weird. But then if you don't gel with them, like now that we kind of live in a world of Zoom, you can like Teams or whatever, you can catch up with people quite quickly. Like LinkedIn as well is another way that you can start like building that connection. And then you can decide if there's nobody, even if a university is absolutely amazing, if there's no one there that's interested in your topic, then it's probably not going to be a good idea to go there, because you're not going to get the support that you need to write something to like thesis level. Yeah. So yeah, it's cringy, but it's definitely worth it.
Great. So when you're talking about supervisors, what actually is the role of the supervisor? Like, what are the expectations of both parties and that kind of working professional relationship?
So your supervisor is basically the person that acts as a guide through your process. So my first supervisor was actually, he ran the master's course at Nottingham, Andy Townsend, and he rudely left me to go and be head of education at Swansea, but he's absolutely brilliant. And so we had a really good working relationship. And so it kind of just made sense that I carried on working with him. And it's part coaching, it's part mentoring. So a lot of the time you kind of come in with these great ideas, and they will tell you why they're not that great. And so they can kind of that part of their job is kind of like saying, that's lovely, I know that you think you're going to change education, but let's unpick this. So it's a little bit kind of like guiding your thinking. They're also the people who set your deadlines, and so they're negotiated, but they're the person who kind of keeps you on track. They're definitely the person that picks you up when you're down. And if you're struggling, then you do like quite have a personal relationship with them as well. And they're also kind of like your tough love person. But in an ideal world, they're also someone that really encourages you. So I've been really lucky with my supervisors, even though they've changed over the course of my studies, which is quite nerve-wracking, but is quite a common experience, because obviously people move on, there's like changes to jobs and stuff. But I think that the best advice I can give is just be really upfront with what you want from your supervision. So my lead supervisor, Jenny, is she's the loveliest person ever, but she is like a cutthroat proofreader, and I really need that, because I have so many typos, or I think it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. And when we had our first meeting, she was like, what do you need from me? And I was like, I need really strict deadlines, because I can just lie to you and say that I've done it. And I can like say, oh yeah, it's fine, don't worry, it will be done in 3 weeks. I need someone who's like, yeah, so I'll get it in 3 weeks then. I need that person, because otherwise everything else kind of takes priority, and you can push it back, and then you end up just doing it forever. So yeah, it's a really weird relationship, because it's kind of like if you're into Star Wars, it's kind of like they're your Obi-Wan, basically. Like, they're part parent, part like boss. It's a weird one, but it's a special relationship that you get to know each other quite quickly.
I really love the fact that we've just made this about Star Wars right now. It's something deeply serious. How can we link this to Star Wars?
We'll see if we can get some like Lord of the Rings in there, and then I'm just like, I've got all my things done.
You see, now that I am down for Star Wars, not so much, but Lord of the Rings,
Oh,
I can go to, or Harry Potter. We can put a bit of Harry Potter in there. Like,
I'm sure we can manage it. Yeah, we're in my area, don't worry.
Okay, so now it's probably a really lovely time to shout out our generous sponsors. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They are publishers of PD books and resources that support great teaching and learning. So if you get a chance, log on and have a look at what resources you can buy either for yourself, for your own CPD, or potentially for your school. So thank you for that, Claire. So moving on then, we've talked about obviously how you'd secure funding, how you'd apply, the considerations that we've kind of got to take into account when we're thinking about those things. Taking this more about you then, because I think one of the crux parts of this show is thinking about how you're actually juggling all these things. So obviously you've got a full-time SLT role. You're a mum of 2 and doing a great job, by the way, mum of 2. And you've also got this PhD in the background. There is so many things to juggle. What does a typical day look like for you?
Okay, well, first off, I'd like to say that I don't want to glamorize being busy, because I think that that's like, it's not helpful. And whilst I am busy, I don't want to be like that person that's like, oh, it's so good to be busy. Like, you could rest, and that can be really important as well. But I try and fit everything in. And I know it sounds really sad, but this is my hobby. And so in the same way that like you could manage to go golfing for a day on a Saturday, it's kind of like how I'd see it. So and I am going back part-time now that I'm like when I return to work, because two babies full-time and doctorate kind of felt like a little bit too much. But for us, it would be, so like full disclosure, like a couple of days a week I do get up at 5, which is horrific, especially if the baby hasn't slept, but it means the house is quiet. I can get some time to get stuff sorted. Sometimes I'll do some reading, sometimes I'll get the house sorted so that everything kind of feels a little bit more manageable later on. And then normal day at school, just the kind of things that you'd expect SLT to be doing, out on the gates, being around, going into lessons, all the kind of stuff that you'd expect. And then the chaos of tea, bedtime, all that kind of stuff. And then when everybody goes to bed, I start work again. And so I'll usually come and sit in here, or I'll be in the kitchen with a cup of tea. And when the house goes quiet about 7:30, because my children are little, the laptop's open and I'm just doing a little bit of, depends on like how functioning my brain is at that point. So it might be proofreading if I'm just feeling like completely dead, or if I've still got a little bit of energy left, then I'll do some like proper writing. But as much as possible, I try and do like a little bit as often as I can, because if you let things go, like 1 week turns into 2, turns into 3, and all of a sudden you can't remember what you wrote last time you started. And so you spend more time kind of like picking up your thought process. So like a little bit every day is better than like 4 hours 1 day a week. And that's kind of how I work. So that makes me sound really cool, doesn't it?
But it's funny because I'm so different. Like once I start something, I will literally just do it all at once.
Yeah.
And so I'm probably your antithesis there. I will literally, I mean, I won't start at 5. That's very, very keen. I might be in the pool at 5:30. I'll be in the pool at 5:30, but that's the only place, or maybe bed. But when I work, I have to block, because my brain gets into it. I will literally block out, I don't know, 10 hours, and I'll just go. And I have to remind myself to then eat, or even sometimes go to the toilet. Obviously, that's obviously during a holiday or a weekend. As we know, full-time job, you're obviously teaching most of the time. But so it's interesting that you kind of work and you sound like quite flexible, and sounds like you have to be flexible to be able to do that effectively, which worries me somewhat, because now I'm panicking. Okay. I'm like, will I manage? Will I cope?
And I think you will. Firstly, I think you'll be wonderful. But the other thing as well is that the whole process of like learning and kind of really putting yourself out there with the ideas that you're having is it really makes you stop and think about like who you are as a person. I know that sounds like quite like deep and philosophical, but I used to be the kind of person that was like, oh, if the conditions aren't perfect, then I can't possibly work. Like everything on my desk has to be at a right angle, and it has to be in the morning. So I'm a morning person, all that kind of stuff. But I think the more it kind of just becomes like your day to day, if I can get 10 minutes, I'll take it. And it just kind of has to work that way a little bit. Sometimes the kitchen has to stay messy, like today. But it just kind of, you have to not let perfect be the enemy of good. And then also I think for writing, the thing that we say quite a lot, like when I'm trying to get something done, would be make it exist first, you can make it good later. So it doesn't have to be everything perfect all the time, and you'll go back and look at your drafts and stuff and think it was rubbish, or you'll get into the zone and you'll want to keep going with it, which is great if you can, but you just have to see how it goes, and you don't know how it's going to feel until you start, and you kind of just figure it out. Like somehow it just kind of happens, I hope.
I think it's a really good point that you've made there, though, because I think, you know, a lot of teachers are perfectionists, and we are so used to controlling our planning, our environment, our assessment, our relationships with students, you know, sometimes even our home lives. And so actually, as you said, sometimes it's important just to kind of make it exist first and then accept that it isn't going to be perfect for quite some time. But actually, I mean, if you're a control freak like me, that is quite difficult to sit with, to know that it is going to be a really long journey. And you will probably do drafts upon drafts upon drafts. And your house environment might suffer in between, and you might not do your pots and pans, and you might not cook dinner that evening. I know if you've got children, you don't have that. For me, I'll be like, oh, all right, I just won't have a meal this evening. Okay. But it must be quite an overwhelming feeling if you're so used to being in control, to think this is it literally is a marathon, not a sprint. And I just need to get ideas down on a page, accept that that is enough for this evening, and that I'm going to be chipping away at that for years.
And it is, it's like, it's such a journey. So when I started, like when I was at uni, I would just pick all the modules that had exams, because then I didn't have to write an essay, and I could just walk into the exam and like revise the questions that I kind of thought would come up, and then I'd be done, and I would always do better because I just couldn't sit and draft and redraft. And so I totally get it. And it is like, you get a lot of support with it though, which is really good. So for your first couple of essays, you get to submit a draft, and then you get some feedback on it, so you can kind of test the waters a little bit. But after that, you do it, you're not going to get it finished. You can't write, I can't do what I did at an undergraduate level and just pick the exam, because there isn't one. And then also, like, you can write an essay at undergraduate maybe like a couple of days before and get away with it because it's like 2,000 words, but like you can't do that with a thesis at 60,000. Like it has to be a slow burn, and like you have to sit with it. So it teaches you patience, which I don't really think I had before, because like even at work, like if it was worth doing, we should have done it yesterday, and like let's make it happen. Like I like working at a really fast pace. And so and in the school that I work in, like I work in quite a challenging context. It's like, it's a very exciting school to work in. There's always something happening. And so then to go from like doing 20,000 steps a day, walking around the school, sorting this, doing that, and then having to go back and like really sit with an idea that you've been thinking about for months, feels really weird, but you kind of just get used to it. And like I think it helps with your like long-term thinking at school as well, which is helpful, because I'm probably like, I think I was too reactive before, whereas now I feel a little bit more like, okay, let's sit and think and evaluate in a way that I probably didn't before I started this.
That's really interesting. I'm a very impatient person, so I clearly need to learn the art of the patience and the slow burn. That leads me nicely, actually. You've touched upon talking about how that's impacted you at work in a positive way, like how it's made you more reflective, it's made you go away and kind of think, be less reactive, think about all the potential solutions to problems. How else do you think your doctorate has helped you in your current role?
Oh, I just in a way, you almost can't put your finger on it. So my favorite quote, kind of linked to like studying and working at the same time, is a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, which is, I no more remember the books I have read any more than the meals I have eaten. Even so, they have made me, which makes me sound like really highbrow, but actually it's from Gilmore Girls. That's what I get. But
yeah. I've never watched it. I started watching it and never actually probably got into it. Is it good?
I love it. Like it's and it's autumn. This is the perfect time, Louise. You've got to get Gilmore Girls on.
I know.
But
well, I think I'm currently watching Wednesday at the moment, and I'm not gonna lie, every time I watch it, I'm like, God, her personality is so similar to mine. Like her sarcasm, she's so dry. She's like, oh mother, we're not even going to have that conversation today. And I'm like, oh my God, it's me. She's sarcastic, she's mean. But
Well,
no, I was having this conversation with a colleague. Now is the perfect time to start wintering.
yes, yeah, definitely. And also, like, I feel like anytime I watch Wednesday, like the inner like 13-year-old goth of me just like wants to scream out and like dress like that, but I try and keep her in check. So there we go.
I love that, but definitely going to try it, because there are quite a few series I actually do need to get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gilmore Girls might be the next one.
So, but basically the idea is that you can't say, well, I read this and therefore I did that, in like the kind of cause and effect way that maybe you might see with other things that you do at school. So it's not like, oh, I'm doing a doctorate and so I put it on the school improvement plan. It's not quite that clear cut. But I'm quoting loads now, but this one's not from a TV show. So Bandura is one of the social theorists that I use, and he says that research engagement is reflective, it's critical self-reflection, and that's the whole point. So when you're studying, you have to really think about your own biases. You have to think about who you are, what you believe, like what you want to contribute to the world, which is like big stuff, right? And so when you kind of go back into school, being able to grapple with those like really big questions makes you think about, okay, so here's the problem that we've got, or here's the thing that we're going to implement at school. What does it look like when that's successful? What might our barriers be? And kind of like the way that it shapes your thought process, I think is just, it's really, really useful, even though it might not necessarily be as like, here's a table that shows you what to do, or like here's a diagram from Smart or whatever, but like it does shape how you are like critical, and how you reflect, and how you look at the way that you approach things. So yeah, there's no clear cut way of saying it, but it's just, and also the kind of jokey answer is that people just assume that you know the answer, so you can just be like, oh yeah, I read this thing and we should do that, and actually you just kind of think it.
That's so interesting though, because research should be critically engaged. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. COVID. We should be critically engaging with it. And we mentioned this earlier, when someone said, oh, the research shows, and you're like, no, but what is that research? Like, who did that research? Where did that come from? And it does need to be a critically engaging process. It does need to be reflective. And I think actually, like you mentioned, this has impacted your role, because it's taught you patience, but also that level of self-reflection, of looking inwards and saying, what are my biases? How are they affecting my decisions? This research I've got, how does that link to me? How does that link to my school context? And I think it opens up a whole other holistic discussion, which means you're going to get more significant strategies as a result.
The other thing is that I think we have so many pieces of information kind of being thrown at us when we work in a school. So there's our obviously really obvious things like exam data, but then we get things like pupil voice, teacher voice. Like there's so many things that we could use to find out more about something that's going on at school. And I think that having that kind of ability to step back and be like, okay, so because I've done a module on methodology, I can better link, so I want to find out how pupils feel about this. Maybe rather than just saying, oh, we'll do a pupil voice, I'll think really carefully about the conditions in which I put that together, the types of questions that I'll ask, how I might evaluate that, all those types of things. So it does have that practical element to it. But yeah, it's just all in it. And also it really changes who you are as a person, which I know sounds like quite dramatic, but it genuinely really is. And it makes you ask yourself the really tough questions, like what do you really think education's for? How do people see the world around them? And those type of questions, like when you kind of, if you take that mindset into a school, it just makes your job more interesting. Never mind like being good at something, like just really enjoying what you're doing is really important. And I definitely enjoy the work that I'm doing more now that I'm trying my best to be as good at it as I can by like researching it, basically.
That's interesting, because I've been doing my job for about 16, 17 years. And in all honesty, I've only really just started engaging with research at a decent level probably in the last couple of years. And that's why I love LinkedIn, because I can be like, call for research, give me some, it then comes to you and you meet colleagues that are obviously putting this research together. But I hadn't been, I mean, as only teaching, sometimes there isn't enough time on our timetables or even in our spare like personal lives to go through research, but it does. And I've actually found that this year, now I'm engaging with it a lot more. Not only am I making great connections and finding really good friends, I'm actually enjoying my job more, because it's actually making me think, why am I actually doing this in my classroom? Like, why am I leading my team in this way? What's the importance of the language I'm using? And what's the impact on the students and my team and the quality of teaching and learning we're providing? And actually, I think if teachers are given kind of that platform and that time on their timetable to then discover research again and to actually critically engage with it, you then think it does reignite that passion, that love for being in the classroom, because it does reawaken, oh, look, this is why I'm here. I can actually make a really big difference. And then, you know, down the line, people can then think, you know, exactly how you thought, masters, doctorate, like, what about me? It's no longer just about my students in the classroom or my team and my staff. I love learning. Like, and this sounds really cheesy, I love learning. If I could, I would just be at uni for the rest of my life doing loads of undergrads. I would just do loads of degrees. Can't afford to, however. But there are so many professionals that would love to then go down that route, but they don't know, because they've not necessarily been exposed to research in their current schools. They haven't been supported with their timetable to actually engage with research. And they don't know it's kind of out there, really. It just gets thrown at you, oh, cognitive load, you know, and short-term working memory, short-term memory. And you're like, oh, is that it? There's so much more. And it does, like you say, it makes you enjoy your job so much more.
I think you brought up a really interesting point there, Louise, and that's about time and the responsibility of SLT to create this environment, though, because teaching is a really, like, it's a full-on job in and of itself. And I don't want anybody watching this to kind of think that I think you should just go home after you've had a really tough day in the classroom and then go and read 7 books or anything like that. I actually, what I think should happen is that schools should create opportunities for teachers to engage with educational research as part of their directed hours, not as an additional thing. Like I've said, that this for me is a hobby. I choose to do it. And so I wouldn't in any way advocate for it being something that everybody has to do, because the passion that you're talking about, we're not going to get that if we're forcing people to do something. And people have lives, people have caring responsibilities, whatever that might look like outside of school. It's also like, it's expensive. So, you know, things like, just even if we're just buying books and things like that, you know, they do have a cost element to them. And so I think I'm very aware that I'm speaking about my experiences from a position of privilege, of having like time and resources to do that kind of stuff. But I think that if we are leading at school level, we do have, and I'd go as far as to say it's like an ethical responsibility to share what information we're giving, what information we're not giving. So I chose to base the improvement plan on this piece of evidence, not this piece of evidence, because it's not true that all evidence will say the exact same thing. Like, it's not the research says that we should do X. The research will say you could do X, Y, and Z, and you chose to do X. So you need to really justify that. And I think that's the responsibility for senior leaders to share that with people that they're asking to engage with stuff, and providing time for that to happen as part of professional development. And then the role of teachers is that you know, excitement about engaging with stuff, but also the trust that's built with senior leaders, that we think that. So for your example of cognitive load, your senior leader will have gone and found you some stuff that is relevant and useful for you in your classroom, and resource it in a way that isn't going to take you forever to read it at home, but is something that is manageable in school. So yeah, it's in an ideal world, we'd all have time to do it, and it would be part of school life, but it's not always necessarily.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, because I kind of want to move in. I think that some of our listeners will be thinking, okay, I'm now thinking this is something I want to do. I've got the passion, I've got the knowledge and know-how now to go and apply to universities, to get a supervisor, to secure funding. But there may still be some fear of, will my school support me? And I wanted to ask you, what are your personal experiences have you felt supported by colleagues at work?
Yeah, definitely. I know this might sound a little bit weird, but if you undertake stuff like a master's or a PhD or whatever it might be, ultimately, like, people are going to get bored of you, like, because you do it for so long, and it's your thing, right? So
Yeah.
whilst it's nice to have supportive schools and it's nice to have like supportive friends and family, and I'm lucky enough to have both, it's your thing. So I think that having that kind of ownership of it for yourself is really very important, because your school may or may not be supportive. My school have been great with giving me time off and things like that, but my experience is that, like, my research hat is like, my world is kind of quite separate from my school world, and that for me works quite nicely, because I don't feel as though I've got a responsibility to research certain things or share certain things, and I that sits quite comfortably with me. And they'll ask how I'm getting on and all that kind of stuff. But schools can be supportive if it takes time away. I think it's always best to check that. So my school were really supportive whilst I was on my taught modules, because I would have, it was basically a Friday and a Saturday, and so my head teacher at the time basically just said, right, that can be your CPD then, because it's free, like, apart from the cover, they didn't have to pay for me to go on a course or anything. And so I was just given that time, which was fantastic. I do have colleagues at universities who have had their schools pay for their masters and things like that. And the kind of trade-off there is that the school will fund or partially fund your research, but you'll research something that benefits the school. And that might be something that really interests you. I think for me, I kind of just wanted to go off and do my own thing. So I did, and it's worked out quite nicely. But it's it's a weird one, in that it's great to have supportive people around you, but studying in this way is it is quite isolating as an experience. So it is just kind of you working on your own in that way.
Interesting. Is there, I mean, this is my ignorance showing here. Is there a particular kind of group on LinkedIn where you get people in a similar position that kind of come together and you're like, I'm struggling to do my doctorate. I don't know what I'm doing here and I don't understand this method. Are there kind of like dedicated groups that people have set up that if it does start to feel a little bit isolating and you haven't got anyone in your family or kind of friendship groups that would understand, that you can then network with online to forge those relationships?
Yeah, I started a WhatsApp group.
What did you?
Yeah. So my course at Nottingham is really great, and the people on it are fantastic, but I was the only person working in a school on in my year when I first started, and everybody else was working in HE, so like they were working at university, so it wasn't quite the same experience. And I essentially just put out on LinkedIn and said, if anyone's working in a school and doing a doctorate, do you want to join my WhatsApp group? And so we've got a group of us, I think it's about 15, and we have an update every Friday. So we just text what we've been doing, where we've been, like what we've been working on, and just give each other a little bit of a boost. So a lot of the time my posts are, oh, I've barely done anything this week, I'm just really knackered. And it's kind of like that camaraderie thing, like, oh, next week will be your week, that kind of thing. I learned about some software that's free to the university that I didn't know about, because one of my colleagues on the WhatsApp group is using it and doing something similar to me. So like just those kind of tips that you pick up is really helpful, and just having a group of people to message and say, oh, I'm really struggling this week, what can I do about it, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, how has it, I mean, if you don't mind, this is quite a personal question. How has it impacted kind of any of your relationships?
I think so. When I first started, my brilliant supervisor Jenny said that one of the things you have to bear in mind is that if you are choosing to spend your time studying, you are also choosing to not do something else. So in the time that you're spending studying, you could be going to the gym, you could be reading for pleasure, you could be hanging out with your friends and doing all sorts of stuff. And so I think just being really honest with yourself about like the sacrifices that you're making with your time, and just being quite open about that. So I I maybe don't always see my friends as much as I'd like to, like weekends away and all that kind of stuff. Like it just gets a little bit trickier. And also, like, I wouldn't be able to do this without my husband, because he's just so supportive. So he works at university, so he kind of gets it. And so if I didn't have that, I don't think I would, it just wouldn't be possible. And also, so my parents were the first in their families to go to university, and my dad did his degree really, really late. So he didn't get his degree from the OU until he was about 50. And so I kind of like, he was going to uni while I was quite young. And I saw him go through all of like the process of studying whilst working full time. And so he really gets it. And so if I just need a morning, he'll take the kids for a walk around the park and just give me half an hour. And so you get people band together, but also it does mean that you have to say no to stuff. Like, I can't always go out on a Saturday with my friends because I have to get up on a Sunday, or I can go, but I'll leave a little bit early. And it does take balance. Like you're choosing to do that and not something else with your time.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, sorry, I'm just processing your answer, because it's the same in education, isn't it? When you're also talking about prudence, you're like, I can't just bring something new in. There has to be some sacrifice somewhere, and it will be the same here with aspects of your personal life. But maybe it's just, I mean, tell me if this is silly, maybe kind of like just planning for that as much as you can imagine. You can't wholly plan for that because you don't know until you're in it, but maybe thinking, are there things that I can cut? Are there social activities? How will this impact me going to the pool, to the gym? How will this impact childcare? You know, and it sounds wonderful that you've got a supportive husband behind you. This makes me think, God, I've just got my cat. Like, oh my God, will I cope? I mean, don't get me wrong, I have got a family full of teachers. There are so many of us. So I do have those kinds of conversations, but I think it's good to kind of build that support network. And it's reassuring to hear that you can set up your own groups, like you can. Yeah. There are some out there on LinkedIn. Lord, love a bit of LinkedIn. But yeah, nice. There's one thing I wanted to ask you about that we've not yet touched on. And it's something that viewers, again, might have some, I don't know, either misconceptions or feel slightly reticent about. Is about the nature of academic writing itself. And I know you mentioned at the start that you felt that you weren't your kind of traditional academic, that you weren't always a straight A student, and that you had to work at things. I mean, what's your advice for people who are thinking, I haven't written anything since maybe my undergrad or my master's years ago, you know, where I'm panicking about things like what's Harvard referencing and how do I cite and how do I even write? What would your advice be? Would that be something that should put people off?
No, but I can see why it does, because I think, and one thing I think needs to change about academia more generally, especially in education, is that I think sometimes the language that is used in literature and the things that you're reading is intentionally quite isolating. Like, it removes like ordinary people from, like, it's not the kind of language you'd hear every day, and so it can be like quite intimidating. And I think that sometimes that's done intentionally as well, which is a real problem. So I think the first thing is that actually it sounds clever, and it sounds like all of those things are like completely intimidating, but actually they're just words, and it's almost like a code. Like we as teachers love acronyms, and it's very, very similar. It's kind of just unpicking what people mean when they say something, and not getting intimidated by things like Harvard referencing and stuff, because that's one thing that people say is quite scary. When I was an undergraduate, you had to handwrite all your references, whereas now you can just use EndNote. It's like part of your uni course, and it will just do all the referencing for you, so it's nowhere near as like time consuming or intimidating. And I think that another reason why I'm quite like vocal on LinkedIn and Blue Sky is that I think that for those of us who are already doing it, we need to break down the barrier that it's some kind of like lofty, unapproachable, impenetrable thing. It's not. They're just pieces of information. So it's just about, if you find something a little bit intimidating, that's kind of your supervisor's job to help you unpick it. So yeah, it does look scary from the outset, and you kind of look at all these like really lofty social theories and all that kind of stuff, but actually when you really break it down, if the books that you're reading can't explain an idea simply, then they're probably not very good anyway, and just ignore them and go and find something else.
That's interesting, actually, because in sociology at A level, we talk about like power and knowledge games, and how actually you do find a lot of literature which is just so verbose. They've managed to create a whole book, sometimes out of really quite straightforward concept. And you're thinking, actually, well, what was your intention behind this? Because in education, in research, it's meant to be accessible. You know, that's the whole purpose of doing research. We want social change. We want there to be positive change as a result of this. But if people can't even access the literature, sometimes it does then give off this, like you say, lofty vibe that you have to be a straight A student or an A-star student, and you have to have found things really easy at school for you to then even consider accessing higher ed. And how disempowering that feeling can be for many people. And I think it's a really important point you raised about there being an ethical and moral responsibility, that schools are then also providing this research. So we are providing these routes for people. Like, this isn't just for straight A students. This is something that is for you. It is for anyone that wants to read, learn, and make change. And I think it's really important. And I'm so pleased that you've mentioned it. This is for anybody. Yeah. Anybody can research and access higher ed. And yes, of course, I'm coming at this from like my own privilege. There are barriers in the way. You've mentioned things like funding and the fact that some courses are, you know, desperately more like expensive than others. But there shouldn't be. I hope people don't feel like there is an intellectual barrier there, because life is full of barriers to accessing opportunities and social mobility. And I don't want people to feel like you have to have been gifted to be able to then move on to higher ed and further yourself, because that isn't the case.
Oh no, absolutely not. Like I got one A-star in English literature, but other than that, like, I'm a history teacher. I got a B in history. I got B's at A level, like B's and C's at A level. I got a 2-1 when I was at university, but like, it wasn't really until I did my master's that I found my stride. And it actually, I think it's quite an equalizer in a weird way, because you can't just be really clever and get away with it. You have to really work hard at something. And so it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare situation. When it gets to doctoral study, you're not really being tested on how clever you are. You're being tested on how reflective you are, and how, you know, like, if you've got the grit to keep going with it. I don't dare Google the dropout rates of EdD students, because like, I think they're quite high and I just don't want to know. But it is really about like working at something for a long period of time rather than being naturally very good at it. And I also think that I think it's probably worked to my advantage that I wasn't always necessarily like naturally clever at school, because when you get some brutal feedback when you're studying, like you get obviously you get a grade, but you get you didn't include this was really weak and all that kind of stuff, and you just have to take it on the chin. And because I maybe didn't get the best grades all the way through school, this wasn't my first experience of that, and so I could kind of be happy to learn and like keep going with it, rather than like kind of feeling like my ego was damaged and so I couldn't kind of carry on, type of thing. So it's much more about, like, I think at EdD it's much more about how excited you are about your research than being like a certain kind of intelligent, in a way.
Nice. We've had Ashley has kindly sent us a comment. There's nothing more daunting as an early career pracademic is going into any classroom. It's a word I've not heard before. Interesting. Is going into any classroom after a morning study session write-up. Recognizing a language we are accustomed to is only impactful if the audience can understand it. Context. So a PhD scholar, practitioner, teaching level 3 students. Interesting. What are your thoughts, Claire?
Yeah, thank you for that, Ashley. That's really interesting. So a pracademic is, I guess I would class myself as a pracademic as well. So you're somebody who's practicing, so teaching either in a school or in HE, and you're writing in an academic context as well. And I think the point Ashley's made there about being like, you can only use language in an effective way if everybody understands it. And I think that knowledge is an entitlement that we have. And so if you have, if you're lucky enough to study at EdD, a part of your job is to make sure that your research is widely accessible and that it's broken down in a way that's understandable. So Like I write a blog that's freely available, and I kind of unpick the things that I'm thinking whilst I'm writing, because I think that if you keep everything behind like closed doors and you guard what language means, then it's kind of creating an us and them that's just really, really unhelpful.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you on that. And I was having this conversation with, who was having, I think it was Josh Coleman, CEO of EMAT Trust, talking about the power of language, even at micro level, when you're having your one-to-one interactions, whether that's with students, with practitioners or academics, or pracademics, new word that I've just learned there. So thank you for that, Ashley. It is important, and how either that builds a relationship or how alienating that can actually be. And like you said, I'm really pleased. I love your blog. There are lots of blogs flying around, and I've actually started writing one myself. I'm a little too fearful to put it out yet.
Amazing.
I know. Well, do you know what? I've designed this website and I'm just tweaking it, and I'm like, oh, there's still so many things I want to tweak. But my plan for it is to have lots of different people's voices on it and lots of different blogs. And I'd love to have yours on there, no pressure. But what I love about your blog is there's a real academic element to it. When I'm reading it, it's not just, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love personal musings and people's personal life experiences, but you combine that with academic literature in a way that makes me go away and think, oh, there's a bit of personal life in there. So I've been reeled in. This is really relevant. I can understand and relate. But then I see some research and I'm like, oh, I've then learned something from reading this blog, but I've not had to trawl through chapters of books to get to it. And I think actually that's something that is, you've struck a really lovely balance with your blog that, if I'm honest, it's difficult to find with other blogs. You either kind of go heavily personal life experience and not very much academic, referencing behind it, which is lovely and useful, or you get people that are writing really long, fairly inaccessible articles. Yours is a really lovely balance in between, and I think it's lovely that you're using your position as SLT, but also as somebody kind of studying still, and your research, and you're giving it so freely, and you're being generous with that, and I think really that's something to be applauded. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you, Louise. And the whole point of it is just basically demystifying how we can use research for stuff that's relevant for our day-to-day thinking. What I usually end up doing is, like, I'll think about something for a couple of months kind of in my head, and I'll voice note a couple of friends that are just as nerdy as me, and we'll kind of talk through ideas, and then I'll write it in about an hour, because I'll be reading the stuff and kind of like letting it percolate, and then it kind of just gets written in an hour and then just gets sent out, and that's how it should be. And what I'm hoping to do is model that process, because it doesn't have to be really long and really intense to be useful. If anything, we shouldn't just be going and reading stuff because it's the latest thing that everybody's talking about. We should be asking ourselves questions about our practice, and then finding things that support us to answer those authentic questions.
Nice. So I'm aware that we're pushing time a little bit, but there's one really important question that I wanted to ask you, if that's okay. A final one. I think we've kind of touched on it throughout this conversation. And as I said, you've been really emotionally generous with that, which I think people will really kind of resonate with. How have you changed as a person? So obviously this journey is a long one. We've talked about it being a slow burn, and we've talked about the need for patience and reflection. How is Claire Harley today different from the Claire Harley that first started this journey?
Oh, Louise, I was so naive. Like, I was so naive. I thought I was gonna like change the face of educational research and be like,
you are. What are you talking about? You're changing it for me.
That's very kind of you. But you go in, you go in because you have more questions and you want to find the answers to them. But actually, kind of the further you go, like, your ego takes a bruising, and I think that that's very healthy. And so I'm definitely aware of my limitations in a very helpful, humble kind of a way. And I'm very, very, if I say something or if I have an opinion, I've really thought about it. I've not just blurted out the first thing that I've like emotionally reacted to, which I think I was pretty like I would do quite a lot before. Karma definitely more reflective. I journal now, which I never really thought that I'd do, but it's a really useful practice in terms of like watching yourself grow and develop as a researcher. I just think more steady, and that bigger picture thinking that you get with your doctorate, it makes those really tough afternoons where a kid's sworn at you and you've got a set of books to mark and you can tell no one's revised, or like you have to mark the homework even though you definitely think AI is written anyway. You can kind of pause and rise above all of that stuff and just kind of see what you were doing it for in the first place. So that kind of bigger picture thinking just means that I've got that resilience to just keep going and hopefully one day be a head teacher that can provide and like a nice school for the teachers that work there would be my dream one day.
Well, this sounds amazing. Let me know when this happens, because I will definitely come and work with you.
You're in. Brilliant.
That will be my next move, Claire, coming to work for you. Don't get me wrong, I love where I am, but I imagine working for you would be a dream.
It's a few years off yet. Like let's not get too excited. But yeah, one day. Like, and that's the whole point of the Ed D. It's thinking about like how you're going to contribute to education. So I didn't think I wanted to be a head teacher before, but now I've decided that's for me. That's the thing.
That's amazing. I didn't know this about you, but I love that, and I think that's so inspiring.
Oh, thank you. If anyone's crazy enough to give me a school, that'd be great.
Watch this space, Claire Harley. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out this evening. I know I've learned a lot. There's so much I just didn't know before this conversation with regards to, again, how to kind of get into a doctorate, how to apply, the funding, a supervisor, the impact on you personally, and your relationships and how you've managed those and how you've juggled. So thank you. It was really kind of you to kind of take your time to do that. And I really hope that viewers have taken things from this, whether you're watching live or whether you're playing back on YouTube. Please do feel free, if that's okay with you, Claire, for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which obviously is Claire Harley. If you've got any questions for either of us, we're both on LinkedIn. I'm under Louise Marie, and obviously we've got Claire Harley here. But on that note, thank you so much for joining us, Claire, and thank you so much, viewers, for joining us. I will be back. I won't be here in 2 weeks' time. Unfortunately, I have a medical appointment, but I will be back in a month's time, talking all things leadership, teaching and learning. So yeah, thank you, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused